Okay, thank you. Welcome. I'd like to welcome everyone to the December 8th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting and begin with an acknowledgement that we are so privileged and to be meeting here today on the unceded and the ancestral territories of the Squamish and the Shtutlian nations. Thank you all for coming and joining us today. And we'll get started with the agenda, and we have a recommendation.
That the agenda of this meeting be approved.
Thank you, Rick. And a second, Ian, thank you. Any objections? Seeing none, we'll call that approved and move on to some minutes. We have a recommendation here as well.
The minutes of the committee, the whole meeting held on November 10th, 2021 be adopted.
And a seconder for that. Ian, thank you. Any objection to that? Seeing none, that brings us to trustee items. And acting as a trustee at this moment, I'm just going to bring one item to our attention. Jen Morris asked me to please remind everyone, well, trustees actually only, that on January the 12th, which is our January board meeting, there will be photo shoots. Individual photos of each trustee will be taken that day to go on our website, along with a group photo, and Jen will send out an email closer to the date with any additional information that is pertinent to that event. So keep that in mind. And January 12th, which is our next board meeting. In Jan, well, it's our January board meeting. It may or may not be our next meeting.
So I assume she'll be employing the Takeoff 20 years and 20 pounds software that you can get nowadays for cameras.
Yeah, yes, we are all counting on that software to be available, although I promise not. All right, are there any other trustee items that would like to be brought up at our committee of the whole meeting at this moment? I see none. We have nothing listed under our presentations, which brings us to our information items. That's Danielle and I, but I'll let Danielle speak to that first.
Thanks, Cynthia. So this is the regular trustee calendars, just updated with the updated coming months. Just a couple things I want to point out to you. So because this meeting was actually supposed to be in Whistler and we decided to have it here due to the fuel restrictions, we're actually going to move the Whistler meeting to be in February. So just note that the February board meeting will be in Whistler tentatively. And the other thing is we're hoping that at the same time, we can have the Whistler custodian recognition dinner on the same date, since we will be in Whistler in February. So that's another change, because we were supposed to have that today, but since we're here due to the fuel restrictions, we'll be moving that as well. And something else specific to the trustee calendar. So if it's okay, I can move on to the winter concerts. So Archie has gathered a lot of information for us on winter concerts. It looks like most of them are virtual. And I'm just going to ask all the trustees if you are interested in attending any of the events, if you can let us know so we can arrange to make sure that you can participate if we let the school know. If you want to let us know now, or you can email us later. Go ahead, Celeste. Really? Oh, wow.
Practices yesterday.
Okay, and which one is that one that day?
Signal Hill.
Signal Hill. Okay, great. 54. Everyone wants to see Dave play the piano.
Must be.
Exciting. It's amazing. Okay.
I'd love to go to math club. Yeah, no, I was going to take my kids. I don't know. I was going to send an email, or is this enough? It's outdoors.
Yeah.
So
We'll just let Jeff know. Yeah, for sure. We'll let him know that you're. Yeah, for sure. That's else have any plans, or you can always let us know later. Just, you're going to, Ian, you said?
Yeah, I'm gonna choose one.
Oh, okay, no pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, anyone, if they just let Archie know, if you decide afterwards, that's fine, so she can make sure that they're aware that you're coming or help set you up with the link. Okay, great. That's all I think I got all of that for the winter concerts. And just another update for school learning plan change. So we had some more changes here. Hopefully, I think Archie emailed everybody. They should be aware of the changes. The one specifically, I think we had Spring Creek moved from November to February due to the staff request for that. So shuffled everyone around a bit. So hopefully everyone's okay with those changes, and please let me know if there's any issues or with that. And I think that's it. Because I already covered the Whistler custodian recognition dinners, day tours, so.
Okay, thank you for that, Danielle. That brings us to 5B, which is the 2021-2022 action item list. Does anyone have any questions or comments around that?
There's nothing on there, so.
I didn't think there was, but I thought maybe in case anyone was wondering why, there was like, you never know. All right.
Can I ask a question, Cynthia? So there hasn't been anything on this list for quite some time. So what might be put on this list? What sort of things have we actioned in the past?
I think I remember this kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong. We've had so much turnover into people. Someone must know, but I thought we were using it as a bit of a holding place. I think, yeah, for things that we just didn't want to forget that were related to board meetings and board work.
You got it.
I was just gonna say yes, and I think at some point in the past, there was a feeling that, sometimes we had an important discussion, and then there was the sense that there was a risk of it getting lost as, all of the new circumstances and context descended upon us. And so we just wanted to create a list where we recorded things that were of interest to the board and we didn't want to lose them. And I think it's reasonable that there sometimes be nothing on there, which of course doesn't mean that we're not doing anything. It just means there's no sense that there's a risk of losing an important item at the moment. That's my recollection anyway.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that perhaps a discussion occurred and maybe there was a bit of a tangent to that discussion that didn't necessarily pertain to the agenda, but you didn't want to forget
That's fair.
those pieces of information, and so they could just sit there until they were put onto an agenda in the future.
Yeah, and I think more than pieces of information, they were projects or tasks that that interested in sort of tracking the completion of. Yeah.
Okay, that's nice and specific.
If I could just add that what everybody in this room will know is that staff has rather extensive and elaborate means of developing work plans and tracking their progress through those work plans, all related to the board's strategic plan, and then descending from that, the annual plans. And so for the most part, just speaking as one trustee, I have a very high degree of confidence that the staff is keeping track of their priorities and their projects. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Any more discussion on this? It seems it seems like it's a valid item to leave on our agenda just for those occasions when it's needed. It's not doing any harm leaving it there, maybe.
It just looks like in the time that I've been on the board, I don't think we've used it for anything. And so for me, it feels a bit like if there's constantly nothing on it, then why? It's not a hill I'm gonna die on, but I just wonder why it's even there. I think we all have systems of, I use sticky notes, in my office where I have something that I want to keep track of. We all have different ways, where as a group unit might need to collectively keep tabs on things. Personally, we might need to collectively keep tabs on things. And I just don't see this thing being used, so I don't think we need to remove it right now, but I think we should think about it, and if it isn't used in the next year, maybe we don't need it. Maybe these things are being collected, being dealt with somewhere else.
I take it one step further than Celeste did and say we probably don't need to continue to put it on there. I mean, in my 16 years on the board, I've seen this sort of thing come and go where, you know, a particular set of circumstances arises and there's a response to it, perfectly legitimate at the time, and then the context changes and those circumstances just aren't there anymore, and it's kind of pointless, and this may have become that. And the other thing I would just remind everybody is, if there's ever a sense for any of us that there's important things being lost, it can be brought back in an instant. Just because we don't put it on every agenda doesn't mean there isn't the possibility of creating this list for the board. But I think it's redundant given all of the other reporting protocols that we have. We have a lot of means of knowing how we're doing at progressing with our strategic plan and our annual work plans. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
And not to beat a dead horse, but just to also draw everybody's attention to item number 7, we actually do capture action items under there. So I would concur that if there were things coming out of committee that we wanted to especially make note of that didn't fall under the other 9 items, number 7 should capture those. And so I would, you know, it's up to the board, and obviously we'll support the board's decision. But if we were to move from 5B and anything coming up to put under number 7, I think that should serve the purpose at this point in time.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing is an overwhelming support for removing number 5B as today action items from the list. Now, I don't think that is an action that requires a motion, but I could be wrong. I don't think so. Can we just leave that then with staff to take care of? Okay, is everyone?
We would do that with you in agenda setting.
Okay. Okay.
It'll be like a magic trick. It'll just disappear. It'll just disappear. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Okay, that sounds.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Technology is tricky. Technology is tricky. Although I am finding if you put the on-off switch under and you grasp and move it up and down, you don't get the knocking sound. There you go. Microphone hack. Maybe. All right, and now with that little tangent from the agenda on technology microphone work, we'll move on to number 6, discussion items. And it's me. This is just a discussion I wanted to bring forward to the board about how we're bringing forward agenda items for board meetings. And I just wanted to get a sense of how everyone was feeling about that right now, if there was any comments, concerns, or questions. So I'll leave it at that. And I see Rick has his hand.
Oh, I got the mic on. I think it's a good one to have on the agenda, by the way. And I think it's a great one to review during our 200 series review in policy committee. And it may well be, because I read it over, our policy over, and I think the policy is a little bit ambiguous and leaves things unsaid that people might want said about how you get items on the agenda, or on what basis would the agenda committee say no to an item, for instance. That can be a concern to a trustee trying to bring something forward. So I just think that I'm glad you brought it forward, but I think we should just table it and send it to policy and let policy wrestle with it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that when policy goes there, they'll probably come up with some changes to the current policy. Thanks.
Thanks for those comments, Rick. I think that sending it to policy is probably the best next step, but I am not the only voice in this room. So if there's any other comments from other people, I'd love for anyone else who wants to say something to step up and tell us your thoughts. Okay, yeah, Celeste.
I agree that it's an important thing to discuss. Was there a particular reason why you wanted to discuss it today?
It was just a niggling thing that was in my brain for the last little while. And so I just thought, why not put it out into the public realm and get people's feedback. Maybe people are perfectly happy with the procedure that we have right now, but as Rick has brought up, maybe the policy isn't quite strong enough and we could improve that. And so I would like to go with the recommendation that Rick has put forth to send that to policy and then take the appropriate steps from there. People are in agreement with that. That's fantastic. We'll move on then to the BCSTA Academy debrief. And Rick, if you'd like to go first and speak to that, that would be kind of fantastic.
Thanks. I'm going to be pretty brief, mainly because you will all be able to shortly, if not today, go to the BCSTA Hub and not only see the topics and the speakers, but BCSTA has promised to publish all of the slides that have been used by the speakers or the remarks. I don't think they were live taped for viewing on YouTube, but the written materials are all there. And so what I would suggest is that if you have a deep interest in what went on at the Academy, you keep your eye on that. And then if there were questions that arose from that, you could ask them at the next meeting. And there were 5 of the people who are in this room now in attendance, and would be happy to answer questions. As far as, you know, I'll just say that I thought it was high quality. There was a very strong theme around equity, reconciliation, decolonization, inclusion, and you know, one of the highlights was the very last speaker of the whole session, who was Jennifer Charlesworth, who I believe her title is Representative for Children and Youth. I may have the title slightly wrong, but that's pretty close. She spoke for at least an hour and a half, maybe. And it was mostly about the most vulnerable children and youth in our society, and where that vulnerability comes from and how the school system intersects with those people and can either support them or sadly, sometimes not, and make things worse for them. The sense of belonging was an expression that she used extensively, and it was a theme that ran through it. And she pointed out how one of the practices that, you know, the public school system needs to look really closely at, in her mind, was the whole suspension, the whole practice of suspensions, when it's used, how it's used, alternatives to it, etc. Because of course it doesn't take a genius or an expert to realize that if you suspend someone from school, you're disrupting any sense of belonging that they may have developed. So alternatives, not that, you know, the incidents that cause a suspension to happen can't go unresponded to, but that the type of response makes a huge difference, especially to our most vulnerable students. So that resonated a lot. Yeah.
Did she discuss at length alternatives that are, I guess, progressive, for lack of a better word? Like what did she go into detail about alternatives to suspension?
I would say she did not. And, you know, I think that, I mean, I'm only guessing what was in her mind, but I think that she would have probably said, you know, that's up to the education experts to know what to do, but her advice would be not to do something that disrupts that sense of belonging. And yeah, that's about as far as I can go. But I mean, these folks were all there too, so.
Yeah, I don't have too much. I don't have too much to add in terms of her piece. I don't know if you're going to speak to what happened afterwards, but it was certainly a powerful.
No, but you should.
Well, so I'll try to keep it brief, but essentially what happened was, it was a very emotional and heavy topic with examples of children who, whose lives were lost as a result of the vulnerability that they found themselves in. And so at the end of the presentation, there were some questions that came up from the room. And some of them were tough questions, and some folks felt a little bit concerned about some of the language, like the term belonging was brought up, and from an Indigenous trustee, I believe, and talking about belonging, implying ownership. And so that wasn't the intent of what was in the talk, but that's how it was interpreted. And so there was some discussion about that, but it was a very beautiful thing that happened because there was increasing sort of tension in the room. There was an Indigenous knowledge keeper that was part of the conference sitting at the front, and he was asked to go up to the microphone just to talk about some of the feelings in the room. And he invited all of the Indigenous trustees to come up to the stage. And they did. And there were probably 20 to 25 people who went up on the stage. Someone handed him a rattle, he began to sing. And everyone joined hands on the stage. And it was just beautiful voice, beautiful song. It just really had such a healing and calming effect on the whole room, and really brought a sense of unity. And so it was a very moving end to the day.
Yeah, there was this sense that, well, it was more than a sense that the presentation, which was super well conducted and sensitively done, but nevertheless triggering for people in the room. So that response that Paul just described was, I mean, I'm saying it was effective. I'm not an Indigenous person carrying that load, so I'm not in a position to say it was effective, I guess, but it certainly appeared to be a good thing that happened. And Paul mentioned a knowledge keeper. It was very interesting that Jennifer Charlesworth has appointed a knowledge keeper, and that's the person who came up, right? But then the BC STA Indigenous Education Committee also has a knowledge keeper on, and they came up together and conducted this sort of conclusion to the whole thing. But it was a very sobering experience. Yeah.
And I'll just add that, what I was really proud of was this was the BST Academy, so trustees from across the province. You had the Minister of Education there as well as the new Superintendent of Indigenous Education, as well as folks from FNESC. And so to to be in a room of people who are naming structural and systemic racism, are acknowledging that it exists, and then sharing, as Dr. Charlesworth did, some pretty horrific stories. I think if anything, it really did help to underscore, where we're at, and that it's an absolute call to action. And I would guess that no one left that room unaffected. And I hope that as a result, right, there's going to be some significant conversations around board tables in districts where there's continuing to be, some issues. We have our own, we're not perfect, but I am so proud to be part of this district and all the work that was done before me and by my predecessor and folks around this room and those that used to be with us before. And it certainly reinforced that we are absolutely on the right track if we, already we knew that, because it truly is the moral imperative. And yeah, I think many of us were also incredibly emotionally affected, but also energized that this is absolutely the work that needs to be done in it, and it's the most important work right now. So that was my experience. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Bill, you have a shot at it if you had some.
I don't know if I
Some
can,
impressions. to share.
I don't know if I can speak, just recalling everything.
I'll
Yeah.
give you a break and,
Yeah.
and just say that while this session was happening, one of the many thoughts that occurred to me was how valuable it would have been for a person contemplating running for trustee for the first time to have been at that session. So we're pretty sure that up to 50% of trustees in the province are going to turn over next year. That is that 50% of the trustees that were in that room this past weekend won't be there, and they'll be replaced by people who have not served on the school board before. That's estimates from the BCSTA staff. Up to 50%, I think, is the yeah, that's a number that I've heard. So we won't actually know how accurate that is until the election happens, I guess. But it doesn't matter whether it's 50% or 10% or 20%. The principle is the same, that it would have been it would have been really valuable for people contemplating a run. And people come with their ideas in mind about what's important in public education and the thing that irritates them or that inspires them, that they want to stand for when they get on a school board. And so it would be great for them to be exposed to something like that. So there is a BCSTA election committee that has just been formed. I'll be on it as part of the board of directors, and its mandate is to increase the profile of the upcoming election next October. But it also has a mandate to do everything it can to increase minority representation on school boards. And so when I was sitting in that session, I thought, well, okay, if those people who are planning to run, some of them won't even know at this moment that they're planning to run, couldn't be there this past weekend, maybe our organization can organize something in the weeks leading up to the election that would provide some of those kinds of experiences for candidates, just so that they would have some orientation towards the current issues in public education.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Yeah, if you did not believe that there were problems in the way society has conducted itself in the past, this academy could not have left anyone with any shadow of a doubt that there are still many obstacles to overcome for many people. And it was heartening that I could see that in our district there is a lot of work being done and that we are doing well. It was also obvious what the next steps are that need to be taken. And the thing that gave me confidence in knowing that we're doing well is that some of the topics that were brought up as topics were things that we were already doing. And so that gave me confidence in knowing that our district is working well to serve vulnerable students and keeping in mind at all times that there still is a lot of work to do. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. It was a tremendously informative and maybe even transformative academy. There were a few moments that were a little bit lighter. It wasn't all as heavy as this, but it certainly was. It certainly was quite a weekend. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Is there anything else anyone else would like to say?
I was just going to add that the attendance was phenomenal, given the circumstances around the province with COVID and floods. So I think the attendance was over 350, and the most that they ever expected to get was like 380 or something like that. So yeah, it was amazing. And of course, there's a few areas that just weren't able to make it, but for the most part, people did get them.
All right, thank you.
Sorry, I just want to, I know Rick did in an email sent around just thanking the senior staff that attended, that gave up their weekend to attend. That's wonderful. Thank you.
All right, I think we have had a thorough discussion on that. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to item 7, action items. I see nothing here, which brings us to questions and clarification from the public. And again, those can be emailed into board at sd48.bc.ca. We'll give it a few moments and see if there's anything there in the meantime.
Currently, there are no questions.
All right, should we give it 30 seconds and see if anything comes in quickly at the last moment? And then after that, we will adjourn this meeting. All right, I watched the clock, that's 30 seconds, and I have consulted with our technology, and there are no questions of clarification from the public at this moment. So with that being said, we will adjourn this meeting. All in favor? All right,
We're back in 6 minutes.
I think we are back in 6 minutes.